What can you do late in the season on wheat to still increase yield?
Well, Brian, wheat is one of my favorite crops, and the reason why, a lot of things have been bred into the corn and bred into the soybeans, and you know what? Some of the extra management things that we do, we don't get quite the return that we do when we do those things in wheat. Wheat is just a great crop for you influencing how it grows, how it protects itself, all these things. There's so many things you can get a great return on your investment on doing in wheat.
Okay, so the first thing I look at when we're getting close to heading time is I'm concerned about disease, because we've had too many years where we've had Fusarium head blight or scab, and then also rust, especially now here in the last couple of years when stripe rust has moved into the northern United States. That's a big deal. Stripe rust is much more damaging than common rust. We have some options here. Back a few years ago, we only had one. That option was Folicure, and it cost $15 an acre, and it wasn't that great on head scab. Well, now there's generic Folicure called Aureus that only costs $2 an acre for the full rate, so that's a great option if you don't want to invest a lot of money. However, there are the better options for head scab, and they're going to be probably just as good as the Aureus on rust. Those options are Caramba and Presaro. They're going to cost a little bit more money, maybe $10, $12, $15 an acre, something like that. But like I say, if they're better on head scab and you're in an area that has that worry, then it's probably worth the money.
Now here's where a lot of misinformation has been put out there, Brian. When we think about head scab prevention, a lot of guys are saying, well, if I spray at flag leaf, that's going to carry over. I'm going to have some residual there, and it's going to protect that head when it comes out. That's absolutely not true. When we're talking about all of these fungicides, they move in the xylem of the plant. The xylem only moves upward in the plant. It doesn't move down.
So that's the reason why you want to get good spray coverage on the lower leaves of the plant. But even with the fungicides moving in the xylem, they don't generally move from leaf to leaf, and they're not going to move into the head very likely. So what you need to do with these head scab treatments is spray at heading when the head is fully emerged, and when you've got maybe 10, 20, 30% flowering, something like that. That would be the ideal timing from what studies have shown.
So you've got to have that plant material out and exposed for you to be able to get the fungicide on there and actually protect it from the head scab. Now, when guys are saying, well, man, I had some stripe rust start to show up and I've got a flag leaf out, you've got to protect that flag leaf. You may have to spray twice. Now, I hope you don't, but you may have to. You've got to protect the flag leaf because it is so big a factor in determining what your yield is ultimately going to be. That flag leaf is the biggest generator of photosynthesis that's going to feed that head on your wheat plant. So you've got to protect the flag leaf. Now, hopefully you can make it till that head comes out and starts flowering before you need to spray, but just in case, you may have to have sprayed twice.
Okay, and the other thing is you're going to need to spray before you see disease. So like Darren just said, if you're starting to see disease, I'd forget all about that. I'd just automatically spray at flag leaf. I'd automatically spray at heading if you're going for top yields. Now, if your yield goal is 30, I mean, that's fine. But that's a little different deal. But if we're talking we want to get 75, 100, 125 bushel wheat is worth a lot of money. Why not invest a few dollars? It does not cost a whole lot, and chances are you're going to get a good return, but this is something we want you to just at least try out on your farm. Another thing you might consider is spraying an insecticide. You got to be a little bit cautious with the pre-harvest intervals, 21, 28 days depending on the insecticide you use, but insecticide is dirt cheap now, $2 to $4 an acre for the full rate. Just scout your fields. If you got bugs when you're spraying, throw some insecticide in. If you don't, great.
Well, and here's another thing too, Brian. When we think about the disease and we think about the insects, a lot of people think, well, that's two different issues, but it can be really the same thing. If you've got bugs out there that are chewing on leaves and opening wounds up on the plant, that's the first place disease is going to get into. It's a plant that's not very healthy to begin with. It's got all these wounds on it.
Okay, the next thing that I would take a look at is fertility. Now, this isn't necessarily going to increase yield, but it will likely increase protein. The two main nutrients really late in the season around heading timing that have a big impact. One you think about a lot, that's nitrogen. The other you may not have ever even heard of this in wheat, and that's boron. But boron has a lot of impact in many different crops, especially around flowering time. So make sure you have good levels of boron. As far as the nitrogen thing, there are many steps you can take to make your nitrogen availability late in the season better.
Well, you can certainly apply a nitrogen product late in the season. Maybe you've done everything right all through the year and you say, I just need a little extra kick right at the end. Now, that can work just fine. Like for us, we'll use something like N Response. We'll use a couple of gallons per acre. You could put it on right at the same time that you're spraying that fungicide late in the season. You want to check with tank mix compatibility, of course, anytime you're mixing things, but it could be done all in that same application.
Yeah, now I'm going to hold you up right there, because when you start talking about putting fertilizer together with fungicide, you're likely going to get more leaf burn, and I would just as soon avoid that. I'd just as soon go in 2 separate trips, but here again, maybe you want to at least try that. When you're putting liquid nitrogen together with almost anything, you have to worry, but when it's with fungicides, I think you need to worry a little bit more.
Well, and here's the other thing too. What some guys will do is use a little bit more water in that application to try and dilute that nitrogen down. That lessens the impact a little bit of any potential leaf burn that you could see. So maybe instead of 10 gallons of water, maybe you use 15 or something like that, just to make it a little bit more tolerable for the crop.
Okay, in terms of other steps you can take with that nitrogen, earlier in the year, you can use a nitrogen product that has a nitrogen stabilizer. You can use an encapsulated or slow release, controlled release nitrogen, that kind of thing. You can also work on building your organic matter over a period of years, because if you have more organic matter, you'll have more free and natural release of protein late in the season. But all I can tell you is you have to have more nitrogen available late in the season if you want higher protein levels in your wheat. It's that simple.
So fertility, insect control, disease control, those things are all pretty common, Brian.
Yep.
But what about plant growth regulators? What about
plant growth hormones? Yeah, I know. So this is one of the things, as Darren and I have traveled around the world, gone to see some really good farmers, and we find these guys using plant growth hormones and biological products, things that, quite honestly, we'd never even heard of in some cases. And they're doing this with success. In the United States, typically it had always been specialty crop growers who were using these types of products because they had so many more dollars at stake than we do. But I mean, let's face it, if you can raise even 75 bushel wheat at the price we're at today, I mean, it's almost like dollaring out like a specialty crop. So what I'm trying to say is at least experiment a little bit with some of these plant growth hormones. One that we've used on our farm with some success has been Happy Grow. But I mean, there are many others. We encourage you just to take a look at that whole category of plant growth hormones and biological products. There are a lot of new things coming on the market, and we at least want you to experiment with some of these things, because there's a lot of yield potential to be gained and a lot of extra net profit dollars to be had.
Well, you're right. There are a lot of different things you can do in wheat, even late in the season, to protect and improve your wheat crop. Well, one other thing that you'll certainly need to do to have a good crop, no matter what you're raising, is controlling our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?